Aloha guys, Dr. Tom Walker's coming back. I'm here again, yes, coming at you live. Well, it was live when I recorded it. Okay, this is where we left off on the endocrine system. Norepinephrine secreted by and epinephrine are secreted by the adrenal medulla, the internal portion. Okay, there are only two hormones that are secreted and produced by the posterior pituitary, and they are antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin, secreted by the posterior lobe. This is famous for the milk letdown reflex in the lactating female. Parathyroid is what's secreted by the four little tiny parathyroid glands. Progesterone secreted by the ovaries, one of the major female hormones. Prolactin is secreted by the anterior lobe of the pituitary. Somatotropin secreted by anterior lobe pituitary growth hormone. Okay, it's more commonly though, guys, called growth hormone or human growth hormone. Less commonly this. Testosterone is the major male hormone, secreted primarily by the testes. Thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, is secreted by the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland. It in turn acts on the thyroid gland to stimulate it to release its hormones. Again, this is why the pituitary gland, guys, is the master gland. Speaking of thyroid hormones, here they are. T4 is secreted by the thyroxine, and T3 triiodothyronine is secreted also by the thyroid gland, and they have to do with metabolism. Vasopressin, I briefly mentioned that in the previous video. It's another word for antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. Again, secreted by the posterior pituitary. It helps us conserve water by functioning on the kidney, and the kidney reabsorbs a bunch of water to keep it from going out in the urine. Okay, here are the parathyroid glands. This is looking at the posterior portion of the trachea and all. Here they are, there are four of them. Here's the esophagus. Remember, the esophagus is the tube we swallow through food. The trachea is the one we breathe through. So here's the fourth parathyroid glands. Let's see. Catecholamines, hormones derived from amino acids secreted by the adrenal medulla. In other words, epinephrine and norepinephrine are the catecholamines. Corticosteroids, hormones produced by the adrenal cortex. Yeah, like aldosterone, cortisol. Electrolyte is a mineral salt found in blood and tissues. For example, sodium and potassium are electrolytes. They help make nerves function and make the body work. Glucocorticoid is a steroid hormone secreted by the adrenal cortex. The adrenals can get kind of confusing, guys, but if you remember that the medulla, the medullary portion, produces the catecholamines, epinephrine and norepinephrine, then you can kind of remember that the other stuff is produced by the cortex of the adrenal gland. Homeostasis is the word, it's a tendency of an organism to maintain a constant internal environment. Yeah, it's a collective term for all the many processes that we demonstrate all the time that protects our internal environment. A hormone, let's see what it says. Substance secreted by an endocrine gland to influence structure or function of an organ or another gland. Okay. Hypothalamus, region of the brain lying above the thalamus, below the thalamus and above the pituitary gland. There's an extremely vital link, guys, between the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. And until they start bringing it up, I don't want to go into it. Mineralocorticoid, steroid hormones secreted by the adrenal cortex to regulate mineral salts and water balance in the body. Aldosterone is one of those. Receptor, cellular or nuclear protein that binds to a hormone so that a response can be elicited. Okay. Soloturcica is that little cavity that the pituitary gland sets in. The pituitary gland, guys, is about the size of a pea, but it's extremely important. Sex hormones, steroids produced by the adrenal cortex to influence male and female sexual characteristics. Steroid, complex substance related to fats of which many hormones are made. Cholesterol is necessary for these steroid hormones, guys. Another important role that cholesterol has. Sympathomimetic pertains to mimicking or copying the effects of the sympathetic nervous system. That's true, but it's seen in medications and drugs. They need to put that in there because its use is utilized only when describing drugs. Target tissue cells of an organ that are affected or stimulated by specific hormones. Okay. All right, here's the adrenal cortex. You'll have much more about this in anatomy class. Glucocorticoids. Remember now, these are all coming from the cortex. Influence metabolism of sugars, fats, and proteins, which is cortisol, are anti-inflammatory. Cortisone influences sugar. Mineralocorticoids, aldosterone, helps save salt. It helps keep salt from being wasted out of the body or passed out of the body. Sex hormones are also secreted by the cortex. Androgens or testosterone, the male, estrogens, the female. Adrenal medulla, A and P, the catecholamines, epinephrine or adrenaline, increases heart rate and blood pressure, dilates bronchial tubes, releases glucose from storage. Why? It gets you cranked up and ready. Now, surprisingly, guys, norepinephrine or noradrenaline does similar things also. Constricts vessels to raise blood pressure. Why? This is the survival mode, the fight or flight situation where you might have to run or defend yourself. So you need that heart rate up and a lot of blood sugar pumping out, and bronchial tubes in the chest dilate so you can suck more air in there. Okay, now the pancreas is unique in the body in that it's the only gland in the body that's both an endocrine gland and an exocrine gland. It's near, partially behind the stomach. Here's the stomach. This is the liver. Here is the pancreas, and this portion is hidden. Remember I said it looks like a fish. This is the first section of the small intestine. It's called the duodenum. And the head of the pancreas is kind of sheltered there in that curve. The endocrine gland, the endocrine portion of the pancreas is the production of insulin and another substance called glucagon. The exocrine is the fact that the pancreas produces a great deal of the hormones that we use for digestion. Sorry, guys, it's in the afternoon. I ate. I'm a little bit tired, so I'm thinking a little more slowly. Pancreas function, again, more in anatomy. Endocrine function, isles of Langerhans produce insulin, which moves glucose into the cells. That's what insulin does, where it can be burned for energy. It also, if there's excess glucose, it will store it, cause it to be stored as a stored form called glycogen. Glucagon does just the opposite. It breaks down. Movement of the breaking. Okay. Let me back up. Glucose, guys, is essential for life. Most of the cells of the body, the vast majority, use glucose as fuel and oxygen. If blood sugar starts falling for some reason, glucagon will break down the glycogen that's stored in skeletal muscles and in the liver and free up more glucose. Okay? All right, pituitary master gland. Pea-sized gland of the pressure of the skull, the sella turcica, also called the hypophysis. The anterior lobe is more of a gland, and it's called the adenohypophysis. The posterior lobe has a bunch of nerves that it shares with the hypothalamus, so it's called the neurohypophysis. Now, those terms are not, they're common, but, everybody calls it the pituitary gland, but you still have to learn these. The hypothalamus, part of the brain, controls secretions of the pituitary via releasing factors or hormones in the anterior and the adenohypophysis, and through nerves in the neurohypophysis. The pituitary gland controls all the other glands. Okay, so here we're showing, here's a cross-section of the cranium and all. Here's the pituitary gland and the sella turcica. Here's drawn out bigger. Here's the adenohypophysis. Here's the neurohypophysis. Collectively, this whole thing is the pituitary gland. But remember, it's about the size of a pea. here's the hypothalamus. There's a very powerful connection here between the two. Okay, the anterior pituitary gland secretes most of the hormones. It secretes growth hormone, TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Adrenal corticotropic hormone works on adrenal cortex. Gonadotropic hormones, FSH and LH, works on the gonads. See? Prolactin has to do with milk production in the female. And then the posterior pituitary has two. Antidiuretic hormone, ADH or vasopressin, and oxytocin. Quick quiz, the outer section of each adrenal gland is the adrenal cortex, of course. Secreted by the anterior lobe of the pituitary, stimulates ovulation in females, and testosterone secretion in males. And it's, of course, it's luteinizing hormone. Which term means surgical excision, cutting away surgically of the adrenal gland. Now, the reason I say specifically, why? Because here's adenectomy. You might jump on that first and say, that's it. But that just means removal of a gland, adenosine gland. Here's adrenalectomy. So it's C. Which term means blood condition of too little potassium? Now, kalemia is the word for potassium. What's too little? It'd be hypokalemia, which could be a real problem. Yes, you have to have those abbreviations. A1C is real important. It's a blood test that measures glycosylated hemoglobin. For testing diabetes and stuff, guys, they can track this over months with that. ACTH, we know what that is. ADH, antidiuretic hormone. Here's a calcium ion. Continuous glucose monitoring system for diabetics. Diabetes insipidus is the name of the disease that you get if you don't have enough antidiuretic hormone. I forgot to mention that until now. Diabetic ketoacidosis, because diabetics sometimes, guys, they have a shortage of glucose and insulin. They break down fats for energy, and it can cause this ketoacidosis. Diabetes mellitus is the official word for diabetes. Fasting blood glucose, fasting blood sugar. Follicle stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary. These are measurements of blood sugar, guys. Fasting means like you haven't eaten anything in 12 hours. So the way you do is you have the patient come to your office first thing in the morning and you measure their blood, and then they can go get something to eat. Growth hormone. Glucose tolerance test is another diabetic test. A1C, this is another way of writing it. HB means hemoglobin. A human chorionic gonadotrophin is one of the things they test for in the pregnancy test. It'll be elevated. Insulin growth factor. Let's see. Here's the potassium ion. Luteinizing hormone from the anterior pituitary, multiple daily injection. Here's the sodium ion. Oxytocin, prolactin. Oxytocin comes posterior pituitary, prolactin from anterior. Parathormone or parathyroid hormone, radioactive iodine, is used to treat and or diagnose problems with the thyroid gland. Radioimmunoassay, and we can't go into that right now. Radioactive iodine uptake. Iodine, guys, is essential for to synthesize T3 and T4, the two thyroid hormones. So you have to have sufficient iodine in the diet. It only takes a little bit. And the way they've dealt with it in recent years is they add iodine to table salt. And that little bit you get from salting your food generally produces enough or delivers enough to produce T3 and T4 properly. Let's see. But they also can make radioactive iodine. They can watch how it's taken up and do diagnostic work on the thyroid. Submonitoring somatotropin, growth hormone, T3, T4, the thyroid hormones. Thyroid function test, don't know much about that, but thyroid stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary, and that's it. Learn these basic terms, guys, and of course, the prefixes and suffixes and all, and you'll learn about the functioning of it all in anatomy. But you're hitting it twice in both classes, and that's the idea. Okay, we're finishing up. Dr. Tom signing off. See you next time.